I've been an admirer of yours for many, not years, but decades.
Oh,
Yes, but it was back in the 1990s. I was a graduate student, and we were living in a state of excitement and confusion at the same time. Excitement because all that economic growth generated by globalization. Confusion because we were told that history was ending and we're all going to become America. Everyone, there's only one way to go, and everyone would forego their own political, cultural, or even religious traditions and adopt Western values. And then a classmate of mine handed me this book.
oh,
Remember
nice.
this?
Yes.
This was the original copy. Okay,
Yes.
The paper was getting fragile here. I'm going to ask you to sign for me when we're finished.
Thank you.
You know, this book. So we started reading this book among my friends, and it was such an intellectual jolt to me at the time. You know, I'm like, what? We can have our own Renaissance. I think in my memory, the first political leader to talk about Asia in such civilizational terms. And this was impactful to my life, to my generation of Asians. And also now, you know, so what I'd like to ask you is this, you know, in 1995 or 96, when it all seemed totally inevitable that we will all become Western liberal societies, and how did you see such a different future? One, right? And two, now 30 years on, 30 years, such a future is sort of upon us. And so looking forward, you know, we live in a turbulent world. And how do you see the Asian civilizational sphere in this juncture in world history when everything seems to be shifting in fundamental ways? You use the term Madani. It's a term so rich in meaning, and there are many different interpretations. What do you really mean by Madani in the context not just of Malaysia, but of Asia and the world at large?
Well, thank you, Eric. You start off with a very series of very complex questions, and of course I'm touched with the fact that you did follow from a distant land. But let me say this, that the late 90s, in particular, were the period of economic jubilance and success, to the extent that the World Bank came out with a report, East Asian Economic Miracle.
Yes.
And my colleagues then, Michel Kamdesu of the IMF and Wolfen Sun of World Bank, were surprised when I said thank you very much, but you know, we still have to grapple with serious problems of inequality between urban, rural, the very rich and the very poor, issue of abject poverty, and a poor governance in our societies. And they were shocked because normally, you know, we would then respond. But I think if we do respond to positively, then there will be this disease of complacency. And then there was also this trend that you must follow their prescriptions.
Yes.
Economic, cultural, political. And that was the time when Huntington was popular, at least his writings, backed by our now friend Francis Fukuyama for the end of history. And many elites actually buy that. To me, it is crap because intellectually it cannot be defended. It can be defended only by those who do not understand history of Asia, the great civilization, Chinese, Indian, Malay, or Muslim, you know. So all converge, and these thousands of years of culture, civilization, cannot be erased by just a temporary economic success. And I said, why can't we Asians, while taking technology or whatever success from the East and the West, maintain some sort of our own heritage and culture? And knowing, I mean, here, growing up with the Malays, the ethnic Chinese in Malaysia and ethnic Indians, I see that these races, they can be very modern, very Western in some ways, but they're also very entrenched in their own tradition and culture. And that actually prompted me to see the need to shift the paradigm a bit. And what is essential is also filial piety, which is very much Confucianist. Is also values, culture, moral and ethics, which will help immensely in our ascertaining the principles of good governance, which is, it can be universal, but it's also very Asian. That's why I talk about the resurgence of Asia, not only economic empowerment, but cultural empowerment. Now it shifts to the next question of Madani. Why Madani? Madani actually is an extension of this. You talk Renaissance, you talk about economic success, you talk about culture and civilization. What attracted me when, during my first real encounter with President Xi Jinping is this precisely, because he is in the sense unique, because one of the few prominent leaders who talk about civilization.
Yes.
So it gels very well with his ideas and our Madani concept. Economy, of course, still remains a fundamental, because people have to live and comfortably. But culture is important because it traces our unique ways and values, which is very embedded in the issue of civilization. So that's essentially what Madani is. Of course, it has its Islamic roots, it has its cultural roots, it has Asian roots. And in a multiracial society here, I infuse the Chinese values and Indian values, so that it becomes more inclusive.
Pluralistic and inclusive.
Yes.
So we're at the end of this brief unipolar moment. There are interests and elites that want to preserve it, want to hold on to it, but I think it's clear that it's ending or has already ended. And we're moving towards a more pluralistic future, a more multipolar world, if you will. So how do you see Asia, also how do you see Islam play a role in this more diverse, more pluralistic future? Islam, I think, is one of the most significant forces in the world today, with tremendous self-awareness and growth in recent years, but at the same time very diverse, different states, different nationalities, different political systems. So with rich and coherent tradition and values, you began your pursuit in politics as an Islamic scholar. And now Islam is such a major force. How do you see it?
Well, firstly, we are, of course, all relieved the fact that the world is no longer unipolar, because the emergence of China, particularly, puts a due sort of ray of hope that there are contending forces which should be essentially friendly to my mind, although some in the West does not see it that way. We in Malaysia, for example, say, look, they are great friends, we should manage and benefit from their contributions and friendship. Now, at the same time, you can see this emergence of Islam, with some the positive, or some there are so-called some extremist traits among the small number, what I consider aberrations from the general trend. But again, as you suggested, Eric, that it is not monolithic. It is so diverse. Although in terms of faith, in terms of promotion of values and ethics, it should be the essence. I see it really positively how it interacts. That is why it is important for looking at the Malaysian experience. We promote aggressively the dialogue, not only Islam and the West, but Islam and Confucianism, for example. Because, and then when the more we probe into deeper, then we realize so many values in common.
Yes.
We had at the time, I remember, when we initiated Professor Tu Wei Ming, one of the great new Confucianist scholars.
Yes.
He became later a good friend of mine. And he also admitted, said, look, I'm a student of Actually, he's a scholar of Neo-Confucianism, but he takes strong interest in Islam precisely because of this. And similarly, people like me, who then sees the strength of Confucianism to be merged with this. And incidentally, I was in Tokyo recently.
Yeah.
I went to Kyoto University and spoke about their great scholar Toshihiko Izutsu,
Yes.
who wrote this wonderful thesis
Yes.
about Sufism,
Yes.
the Muslim mysticism, and Taoism,
Yes.
and how the two can, actually the synergy, the compatibility, which is great. I think that's what the world needs.
Yes.
Instead of this condescending, anti the other attitude that was remnants of colonial imperialistic era.
Yes. In China, I think in recent years, we began to talk about this concept called common values,
Yes.
as opposed to universal
Yes.
values. Universal, the word universal means singular,
Yes.
unit. It's only one way to go.
Yeah.
I think the word common
Yes.
means accommodating differences and different values, but yet find something in common.
I think it's correct. I mean, I stand corrected, Eric. I think it's a timely reminder. Although what you mean universal means it's global, it is international, but I think common values probably is a more powerful message.
More inclusive.
More inclusive.
Universal, by definition, is exclusionary.
Yeah, yeah.
There's only one.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting, but with all that happening, it's exciting, of course, that we're onto a new kind of outlook in the world. Everything is shifting, but there are also many, many dangers, many, many problems and sufferings around the world. The recent conflicts in Gaza, for instance, and that's close to Islam, and it's the clash between two different types of outlooks, two different types of civilizational spheres, if you will. I don't want to be hunting-terrian about this, but it's true. And you being outspoken about the sufferings of the Palestinians, you actually met with leaders of Hamas. What's your take on the conflict and where it's headed and what it means to the world?
Of course, involve majority Muslims, but quite a prominent number of Christian minority.
Yes.
And as you know, although mosques have been demolished, so are the Christian churches.
Yes.
So I think this is, to me, is issue of justice, of colonialism, of apartheid, which is not confined to Gaza. I mean, and people talk about always 7th October. That what is to me annoying in the sense that you want to erase 70 years of history by talking about one incident and harp on it because that's the Western narrative. You see, that's the problem with the West. They want to dictate the language of discourse. We can't accept that anymore, you see, because we are not. They are no longer colonial powers. Free countries should express. I mean, we are as strong in our views during the apartheid policy in South Africa. So, and even in the issue of Russian attack on Ukraine, we have some views on that. But we also need to strongly suggest sort of negotiated settlement, amicable resolution, which is possible but denied by some groups. But what is appalling is the double standards and the hypocrisy, genocide in Ukraine,
Yes.
and some problems in Gaza.
Yes.
That to me has such a negative impact about what the so-called democracy and the champions of human rights are. I mean, if I talk about democracy of human rights is human rights.
Yes.
It's not just rights of some colored people against the rest, and vice versa.
Yeah, it's total. And but you're also sensing there is an awakening around the world.
Yes.
Before it wasn't like there's an awakening. They're running naked, okay. But at the same time, there's an awakening around the world. I sense there's an awakening of this global South idea.
Yes.
that the people of the global south are finally waking up to their own feelings and their own identity and who they are, and they're beginning to say, wait a minute, not everything on CNN is true.
That's true. Now global south are getting traction now.
That's right.
Yeah, I was talking to President Lula, Brazil.
Yes, I interviewed him.
Oh, yeah,
yes,
great.
last year. Yes,
he's a great guy, and we're just pushing for this agenda forward. I thought we left it for some time. From the days of Chow En Lai and Sukarno and Nyerere and Nkrumah, Bandung, Asia Africa, Bandung, 1955.
Yes.
But nothing much has changed in terms of the general condescending attitude, the colonial mindset. It's still there.
Yes.
It's appalling.
Yes, it's but there is an awakening, and it's a matter of how we. I always say that the big difference between the global south and the west is that the west is homogenous, same race, same religion, same political system. They are the same. The global south is diverse.
Yes.
Different traditions, different religions, different political systems, but that could also be a strength. So that's a lot to look forward to in the next 10, 20 years.
Truly global.
Yes, it's true. We are the world.
Yes.
They are the West. Yes. Fareed Zakaria wrote this book called The Rise of the Rest.
Yes.
So he said the West and the rest.
Yes.
And I like to turn that around and say it's the world and the West.
Yeah. But it's interesting, but even the West is cracking.
Yes.
You can see the attitude of Spain, for example.
Yes. Yes.
Quite assertive.
Yeah.
And making no qualms by taking a different position.
Yeah. But then, as globalization is changing, we're seeing, I think it's primarily because the U.S. feeling a lot of competition from China, other countries, but mainly China, that they are trying to go backwards in some ways, especially on technology and on finance. Basically, two things: technology, they want to ring fence the best technologies. They call it small garden and tall walls, so that China and whatever countries they don't like cannot access them, and to reconfigure the global supply chain or disrupt the supply chain. That's on technology. Second is finance. They've chosen to weaponize the global financial system, the sanctions, the U.S. dollar as reserve currency. So can the global south, developing countries who want to develop further? There's a famous scholar in England who wrote this book called Kicking Away the Ladders. It's that you moved up and you kick away, you don't want the next guy to move up. So how do we band together and continue interconnectedness, continue development with them now trying to retreat and erect walls?
Well, I said, firstly, as far as a country like Malaysia, we don't have that mindset of China phobia.
Yeah.
You see, we consider that an important neighbor, great trading partner, and we don't have problems. And now we're extending it beyond just trade and investment to culture, the arts, education, and science and technology and AI.
Yes.
So, and we are comfortable with it. But the problem with the United States is that they are great champions of competition, but now they are also protectionists.
Yeah.
They are great promoters of free trade. They also runs contrary.
Right.
So I don't think they should impose.
Yeah.
And if countries they will consider the other, have that resolve and strengthen the global south spirit, then we can pose an important force. I mean, if they work with us fair. I mean, I don't feel that they should revive the Cold War mindset. And I've said it frankly, even that was the session in San Francisco in front of President Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping. I said it was quite a relief that you two great leaders met. Hopefully it will be for the better, and we in this probably particularly global south will rejoice that. But of course, the Chinese tried to make the necessary adjustments, overtures. But then when it comes to protecting their turf, and blocking the encrypted technology. That is, to my mind, very difficult to comprehend. Because I thought that we should do whatever is necessary to promote, new technology, new findings, AI, etc. But now, no. But you promote, but it cannot be Chinese.
Yeah. The U.S. is very intent on making countries choose sides, choose their side, and the Chinese are not interested. So recently I've been thinking about this, and I said, look, if you refuse to choose sides, you're actually choosing China's side, because China's worldview is that we don't choose sides. If you want to protect and preserve the unipolar world, then you have to choose sides. So we don't want to, but tactically speaking, this kind of environment is great opportunity for neutral countries, for Malaysia, for a country like Malaysia, for instance. And you recently gave this very important speech about semiconductor industry. I noticed because, when you have this kind of, it's a huge industry, one of the biggest industries in the world. When you have this kind of fierce struggle, a country like Malaysia could play a positive, constructive role in continuing the open flow of technology if it could remain neutral.
That's right. I mean, now is a different world, because those days we were a bit afraid because the pressure is so strong that you must take the side of the West, otherwise you'll be punished. But now we say, well, look, we engage with both, we are friendly with both, and with this, for example, Germany talked about de-risking. So they will contact China, but then they will use the third country and say, okay, you're welcome. So we are fortunate in that sense to become a hub of semiconductor industry. We come up with the, chips, and but when they can't start imposing, we say, no, we can't.
That's right.
We are essentially a neutral country, and America has been an important trading partner all these decades. China is an important strategic partnership now that we are experiencing. Many of my colleagues ask, are you sure the Chinese are not imposing or insisting, including issues South China Sea? I say, I don't know about other countries. Of course, I engage with them, but we have not had a problem. So I can't. Why do you expect me to anticipate a problem? And yes, there are problems. We have problems with all our boundaries, our neighbors. But these are minor issues that we can resolve. I was with Prime Minister of Singapore.
Yesterday.
Yesterday, and we still had some, issue, water, FIR, the flight, and then maritime boundary. But we are still great friends, and trying to talk out and resolve this.
I think that attitude, that outlook is constructive even in, say, South China Sea, for instance. There are many differences, but you don't have to get into a problem. But we do have the outside power, the U.S., being very active in this. So how do we deal with that? I mean, it's in our neighborhood, it's in our region. We have an extraordinarily promising future. All the countries, most countries in the region, most ASEAN countries, and China and India are developing very well in our own ways. Yet we have these simmering tensions, but then that's heightened by geopolitical struggles, especially with big powers and from the outside. So how would Malaysia, how would ASEAN look at this and deal with this?
Well, our policy is clear. There's no simmering tensions, and some contentious claims, we say, okay, we discuss bilaterally or multilaterally within ASEAN. But that's been the position. We set standing notes, complaining here and there, but that's the minor which it does not in any way cast, or make things more difficult or create this sort of distrust. Does not. Okay, some countries in ASEAN start having that those issues. Our position is you have to negotiate among friends, and there's no reason why an outside power. If I have a problem in Singapore, I don't want a third party to be involved. there's a border issues with Thailand or with Brunei, they let us resolve amicably among ourselves. Even in the issue of Myanmar, we said there's a need for 5-point consensus. The neighbors can start talking quietly, but ASEAN as a whole will take that position. We prefer that than getting outside force to impose any condition.
That's good. And ASEAN, of course, is a very robust, coherent global South institution. And then now we have, how do you see global South institutions evolve? We have BRICS now. We have the AIIB, the financing institution. When is Malaysia going to join BRICS, by the way?
We have indicated as a policy that we are.
Yeah.
We have made a decision. We are placing the formal procedures soon. But as far as Global South, we're completely committed.
Yes.
And I'm working well with President Lula in expanding this sort of issue. We our policy. We're just waiting for the final results, and the government in South Africa.
Yes. Another question that people talk about is, so for the first time, I think, recently, the countries of Global South trade more with each other than we trade with the Global North collectively. So there's so much going on amongst our countries and trading and economic activities. Why are we still doing it with the US dollar? President Lula was in Shanghai last year, and he gave the talk at the New Development Bank. And he was very passionate. He says every night he goes to bed, he can't figure out why are we using the US dollar to trade amongst ourselves. You were finance minister. It's ridiculous. But we have to pay financial ransom to this. How can we, what are the step-by-step way that the Global South could band together and gradually be independent of an outside financial system that's imposed on us?
I have officially called for the setting up an Asian Monetary Fund.
Yes.
And we are now in the midst of serious discussions. But meanwhile, for example, with China, we have crossed the 20% of the total trade, which is quite a big volume for us, in local currency, which means there is that possibility.
Yes.
Because otherwise, say our currency ringgit doesn't make sense. Inflation is low,
Yeah.
growth is high, investment is huge. Last year was the highest ever recorded in the country, and still,
Yeah.
the currency is being attacked. Okay, the last few weeks was much better, more comfortable, but you mean it does not make economic sense. It runs contrary to basic economic fundamentals.
Yeah.
Why? Because of the dominance of one currency, completely alien to the system and irrelevant in terms of economic activity, but purely because it is used as international currency. So I said, well, we cannot discount it. There is still role for the dollar, but we can reduce substantially the impact on our economies if we use our own currency to trade, and hopefully can mature and forge a new understanding in terms of Asian financial system.
So how would this Asian Financial Monetary Fund work?
Well, certainly it's premature, but the
Yes.
staff in the central banks have been working on it. They have started an initial phase is to use local currencies in bilateral trade. 20%, for example, up to now with China, about 18 to 20% Indonesia and Thailand.
Yes.
I mean, it's a good start, but I think there is still room for improvement, that we enhance this sort of collaboration, and then start having players on board. Of course, people say, well, we don't want China to dominate. I say, let them have an independent setup, professionally run, and I think China's role is key to ensure the success of this fund.
Yes, I think that's another thing that we need to kind of so China obviously is a big participant in all the stuff in Global South, and just by sheer size, it's intimidating. It's because it's just big, and that some other people may perceive that as a threat. And the U.S. is doing all it can to making sure other people think it's a threat.
They have not read history. I mean, I'm a student of history.
Yeah.
We had the Malacca Kingdom hundreds of years ago.
Yes.
We had engagement, very active engagement with China. All our legendary stories and historical texts talked about various trips to China. Talk about Cheng He, Admiral Cheng He visiting Malacca 5 times, I think.
Yes.
So there was no history or episode of war being declared or colony being set up. Contrary to our experience with the British or Vietnam and the Philippines with the Americans or Indonesia with the Dutch. So I think history tells a different story. And now you are creating this fear-mongering because you think that it is a strong neighbor. Of course, China is much stronger now economically. But you talk about 500, 600 years ago. It was a strong force economically, militarily. I mean, I think it was 1451, which is considered to be the major armada unheard of in the world. So it's nothing new.
Yeah.
But was it used for mandatory purposes? No.
Right.
So I just answer them from history. For the last 1,000 years, nothing happened. What made you think the next 50 years something great is going to happen?
Yeah.
Now, for the last few hundred years, a lot happened with the West.
Yes.
Almost all our countries were colonized.
Yes.
So you just look at history. Oh, they say, that's the past. Then, accept it and move on.
That's what I try to tell Westerners. Our countries, Malaysia, China, our countries are not like them. Both of our countries developed very fast, tremendously in the last decades. Malaysia, since independence, this was amazing story. A much smaller country, of course. I think at the time of Malaysia becoming independent, you had 60, 70% people living under abject poverty line. Now it's negligible. Amazing accomplishment, okay? We created all this development, all this prosperity without invading, colonizing a single country. Look at what they did through industrial revolution, through industrialization. So it's different. It's different, and that's the narrative that the global South needs to band together and tell ourselves.
Probably their history books does not tell this sort of story, right. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's why I always quote this Palestinian Arab scholar Edward Said.
Said, yes.
Yeah.
Orientalism.
Yeah.
Yes.
Orientalism, and the small article in his critique of Huntington's Clash of Civilization.
Yes.
He said there's no clash of civilization, but there's a clash of ignorance.
Yes.
It's very apt description. That's essentially a problem. We talk about history, about culture, about reality. You can't defend the son of argument except out of prejudice. Yeah, and a condescending attitude towards the other.
Yes.
Again, you mentioned Orientalism. This again, but about the other. The other cannot be right.
Yeah. Well, it's very, very exciting time.
Yeah, I think we should organize a small symposium on this.
Yeah, we should do this kind of. There are a lot of policy forums.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's a lack of place for people to engage in deeper discussions.
Yeah, that's true.
And that could look further ahead, or further back, and connect the dots, and conceptualize different things. That's what we really need, because the Global South needs its own fundamental narrative, its own fundamental set of ideas. That's what's lacking, I think. And
you're right. I think been involved quite a number of numerous discussions, but it is essentially just economic, financial, which is again, as you say, fundamental, is critical.
Yeah.
But then you got to go deeper. But this was an argument. Then there is, to me, you forge real understanding through appreciation.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And that's why, I mean, you should lead such an effort, right? And also, that's why Islam is so important. Islam, being one of the world's major faiths, has fundamental values that could work with modern. One of the biggest problems China has experienced in the last century is that we are forced to make a Faustian bargain when we accept the modern. It doesn't have to be this way. But we're being told that we had to do this, and to a large extent, we did do this. Unfortunately, okay, we're trying to pick it up. We're trying to get it back. Our President Xi Jinping recently, if you see him again, you could talk about this. Is that he recently put forth this idea called the two fusions?
Yes. To me, something really heartening. I mean, I really welcome that.
Yes.
Because rarely leaders don't talk about this.
Yes.
This fusion of cultures, or understanding, which I mean, I said it to the president himself.
Yes.
I said, I'm never mind economics and finance and trade, but I am deeply touched because you talk about something which is not talked about by, except for some forums.
Yeah.
But here is a philosophy, or set up for the country, and where it's a long way to go. I mean, I really feel, and in fact, we may be working on this, with China, and I think because he's looking at Malaysia in that sense a bit unique.
That's right.
Relations with countries are all the key issue of digital and science, which is important. I'm not denying that or ignoring that fact. But then, which is something exceptional, which we will work with China, is that real, meaningful feast of civilizations.
Yes, we need more philosopher leaders in this world that could, but you also need to kind of endure and hang out for a long time. You've been at this for a long time, but I noticed in Malaysia, this worries me a little bit. In the first 60 years of your independence, you had like 6 prime ministers.
Yes.
In the last 5 years, you had like 5 or something. I mean, So, I mean, you gotta figure out a way to get your stability back, right?
Now it's fortunate.
Yeah.
It's very stable.
Yeah.
I think, because I used to joke, I know you want to prove yourself to be very democratic. Every man has the right to become prime minister. And so you have 5 in 4 years. But it will be disastrous for the country.
Yeah.
But political stability is back, and that's why people, you can see this aggressive presence of potential investors coming in a big way. In the last 6 months, it is phenomenal. I'm pleased to say that, and from all parts of the world. Of course, mainly China, United States, Germany. Yeah. But it is impressive.
Yeah.
But through political stability.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
clarity of policies.
That's right. And with underlying principles.
Yes.
And values.
Yeah.
So, good. Well, before we finish this conversation, I want to ask you something personal. Shortly after you published this book, we know what happened. And it's been nearly 30 years. You've triumphed. But after 20, 30 years of unimaginable hardship, if you were to go back to 1998 and you face a younger Anwar yourself, what would you say to him? What advice would you give him to prepare for what's to come?
Well, I would say this, that we live for certain values in life, some principles. Of course, we want an easy way out. no one would want to endure such tribulations and hardship and insult and abuse, mentally, physically, which affect even your family, your close friends. But I think to develop a country, you must develop the individual. And the individual strength is, of course, material, physical, but also values, which is inherent in the spiritual understanding and upbringing. And I think that kept us strong. I mean, I happen to be known in terms of my sacrifices, but I think there are thousands and thousands others who are not recorded, but who have done so much that enable me then to manage and survive. I don't think, given the situation now, that others will have to endure the sort of hardship. But notwithstanding, they have got to be told that life is not easy. If you want to affect change and take reform, you have to, of course, work harder, better discipline. You have to inculcate more understanding, better knowledge, better understanding not only for yourself and your faith, but others, than to make truly a great country and a great for humanity.
Yeah. So no regrets.
No regrets. I mean, to be honest, Eric, there were times I say, "Oh my goodness, could I have done it differently?" Because, especially when I think about the sufferings of my wife and my children, you see, and my close associates, they don't deserve this. But that at times do disturb me a bit. But when I meet them, rarely difficult, but I saw them and look at my wife, my children, nobody complained. They were just, so much love, affection, understanding, and support. And more important, the conviction, that yes, it's a reformasi, Then I say, oh my goodness, then we should go. And that actually, so credit goes to them too, or in a sense more. Can you I sometimes imagine, what if I have to endure a situation where there's a family breakup, then it would be unimaginable hardship.
Very important. Well, you still have a long way to go, I believe.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Prime
thank
Minister.
you.
It's been a pleasure and honor.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to sign this book for me. It's the original copy from nearly 30 years ago that I read.
Okay.
Wow. Thank you so much. And this is my recent book.
Oh,
It's
thank
about
you.
comparative political systems and Chinese governance. And
Okay, I will have a look at it.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.